Hey, everybody. Looks like we are live. Put my headphones away. Get my messages turned on to the correct messages. All right, let's see who we've got. We got Zini, the Zine Machine. Art Knight, hello. Dade, hello. Sure, I saw Shirley in here somewhere. Shirley, there you are. All right, Michael, hello. Steve, you made it. Mike. Oh, it's all right, Michael. I do want to check my mushroom bag tonight. So, Steve, if you're interested in seeing that while you're still awake, let me know, and I'll go do that sooner rather than later. If you want to see what it looks like, it's been a couple of days now since I mushed it all around, so we should be getting some pretty well distributed, even mycelial growth going on in the bag. But I do want to check it tonight and have a look at that. Let's first get started with the feeding of the pond. We're also going to get my little air pump installed in the shrimp tank tonight. I'd forgotten about that till just a few minutes ago, but fortunately when I checked in the other room, I always keep several spare air pumps sitting around just in case I need one, and tonight I did. So we've got an air pump. I've got one of those little check valves that reduces the airflow. It is only a 5-gallon tank. I don't want crazy bubbles going on in there, but I do want some air movement. So we have this absolutely adorable little sponge filter that we're going to be installing in the shrimp tank tonight. So that's all we've got on the agenda as far as doing any work in any of the tanks. Laura, spurts. Nestled in the warm embrace. Zini sleeps 20 hours during the day, but then he's up all night somehow at the same time. Sleeps 20 hours a day, but also stays up for 20 hours a night. He's the only person in the world to have 40-hour days. Carol of the Bells was actually on the playlist I was listening to tonight, but I deliberately listened to three of my favorite Christmas songs tonight. And they're actual song, like Christmas songs, the kind you hear playing in a department store or something, not my, Nutcracker Suite or anything like that. These were actual Christmas songs I was listening to tonight. Thought about wearing my Christmas hat, but I think it's a little early for that. And I really don't like wearing the Christmas hat. It's really hot. And I didn't shave my head tonight. So with, basically I've got a Velcro head. To try to put a felt Christmas stocking on my head is a little challenging when your hair is like mine. Eugene, hello. No, I don't really decorate anything for the Christmas. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Zini stays awake on one timeline while he sleeps in the other. Nice. There you go, Steve. That's the second one on my list that I listened to was the Kinks' Father Christmas. But the first one, which is probably, I don't know if it's my favorite, but I always kind of think of it as my favorite, is a song about having tried to hook up with somebody all year long and it never worked out. And finally, because of a little bit of Christmas magic, they met at the grocery store and were able to get together for Christmas. Now, I listened to Charlie Brown Christmas on Wednesday. No, I fucking hate that song, Baby It's Cold Outside. I was saying that song was horrible 20 years before. The first time I ever heard that song, I was like, what the fuck am I listening to? It took another decade before other people started noticing that that song is a little problematic. Oh, the Sharks are both doing well enough. Let's move on to the next tank. We're not going to spend too much time feeding tonight. It's only going to take a minute to install that air pump, but we'll get everybody fed first and then we'll get that done. And my first song is also from a band that isn't technically a one-hit wonder, but you probably couldn't name any other songs from them. It was an all-girl band, a girl group, if you will. And you all know the song. I know you do. I almost said hi to the Fish Fam link. Silver Dollars are doing well. We'll be seeing them in a minute. Do I think an overabundance of snails would prevent or slow shrimp breeding? Honestly, I only think, and I could be wrong, it's possible that the snails might try to eat the eggs, but since the shrimp kind of carry the eggs around with them, it's not like other snail eggs that just get deposited. So the snails probably aren't a threat to the eggs. Food competition is the only thing that I could think would restrict the breeding of the shrimp. As long as there's enough food to go around, I don't see why the snails in there being in an abundance would affect the way the shrimp breed. Because I've certainly got a gazillion shrimp in my shrimp tank, but I've also got a gazillion snails in there as well. And to answer your question, Dave, the plants that are in there is Java moss and a little bit of crypt. And so you all know what tank we're talking about. We will be getting to this shortly, but this is the tank we're going to be working on. And if you actually take a second, let me get you off your perch here. If you look down in there on the bottom, you can see just shrimp crawling all over the bottom. But if you look up along the edge here, you can also see snails all across that edge. And I mean, there's a lot of snails in this tank. But we're going to be getting in here and adding a little air stone. We're going to put it in that back corner so the bubbles come up sort of underneath of this tray and we won't really notice them all that much. So I even got snails floating on the surface here. That's a good one. We'll throw that in the goldfish tank there. Either the goldfish will eat that or it'll just go to help keep the tank clean. So, all right, let's keep moving. We'll go over, we'll hit the other 125 Daryl. Oh, I also looked up something we were talking about on Friday night to find out whether I was right or not, because when I answered the question, I was just kind of answering off the cuff, thinking out loud based on what I already understand about the world. And I later got to thinking and not necessarily second guessing myself, but wondering if I was right or not. And so I looked it up to find out if I was, and I was. But I also learned something. And so we will talk about that. and it has to do with the question I was asked about whether or not you could use wool as a filter material in your aquarium. Now, this is obviously an academic conversation. I don't think anybody out there is legitimately considering using wool as a filter material, but it came up as a question and it was fun to think about. So I did a little bit of reading on it. And so we're going to talk about that at some point too. All right, let me see where I was. Shamu, my son. Silver dollars are omnivorous. They'll eat little insects or fry that's swimming around the tank. I'm sure if I dropped bloodworms in there or little bits of chopped up earthworm or something, they would probably destroy them. But they also devour plants. But they're not predatory. They don't hunt other fish and all that per se. Do I like the giant Danios bluefish? I'm not a big fan of the Danios. They're maybe not as bad as my memory. If you have like a bad experience with something, you're not really interested in trying it again. And years later, reality is maybe the experience wasn't as bad as I thought, or I've changed since then. But when I got Danios early on in the hobby, they were way too active, I'll say. They were downright frantic swimming around the tank, and they made me feel frazzled. I didn't feel relaxed looking at them at all. They actually stressed me out. And so I got rid of the Danios, and I've never gotten any type of Danio since then. I'm okay with Rasporas. I'm a big fan of Tetras. I've always been a Tetra guy. I like all the different types of Tetras. In fact, those silver dollars there are a type of Tetra. I just moved my hand over top the tank to put the stuff in. It always freaks them out. I guess it's instinctive. If something moves in, a shadow above them in the water, indicates potential predator. And so they always scatter whenever I reach over top the tank. For as many years as I've had these silver dollars, they're still pretty skittish fish. I think those are the fish that probably fall into the prey rather than predator category more often than not. I don't think I named the silver dollar. I did name the cichlid you can see right there in front of you. Well, I don't know if he's there now, but he's there in the thing that I'm looking at now. But I named that pearl cichlid Mr. Fabulous. But I don't think I ever named any of the silver dollars. I can tell you all about my rude awakening I got yesterday at 7:15 on Saturday morning. I jumped about a foot out of bed when my wife let out a blood-curdling shriek from the kitchen. So I jumped up running out to see if, we had a home invasion going on or something. And right as I was coming down the hallway, I heard the back door open and close real quickly. And I got into the kitchen and nobody was there. So I was like, what the fuck? And then I could hear my wife out in the yard screaming. And so I, ran over to the door and opened the door. And she's out there in her bathrobe at 7 o'clock in the morning in the snow, flapping her arms up and down, screaming at deer that were in our garden, eating near one of the azalea bushes. Scared the deer away, but I was fucking awake after that. Didn't get back to sleep till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, with the big silver dollar in there, Shamu, I can tell, like, I mean, you see him right there in front of you. He's very distinct. I don't know if I'd want to name all the silver dollars unless I wanted to name them like nickel, dime, quarter, or something like that. I could go by size. Um, but yeah, that big one in there is definitely noticeable. I do like barbs. I like the tiger barbs. I just don't have the kind of tanks that they work in. But I've got several cherry barbs. I've got some rosy barbs. Um, I don't know if I've had any other type over the years, but I have had tiger barbs before. They just didn't work out because of the kind of community type tanks I have. It must have been a hell of a fart. I did kind of freak myself out this morning. My right arm was like totally asleep, and I was trying to bring it over to like clasp hands with my left hand, interlace my fingers. And my arm was so asleep, I couldn't move it or feel it. But it was also my, like the proprioception in my arm was asleep. And your proprioceptors, you have a whole system in your body of specialized nerves that measure the angle between one joint and the next. That's how you can close your eyes and still touch your finger to the tip of your nose. Is you know where your hand is in space because of your proprioceptors in all of your joints in your body to tell you how everything's angled in association to how everything else, and your brain puts together a 3D model of that. But all that was numb. Everything was numb. And so I kept trying to lift my arm up, and it wasn't moving properly. It was just kind of flopping. And at first, it flopped onto my head, and I felt a hand hit my head. And so I thought it was my wife, like trying to tell me to be quiet or something while she was sleeping. And then my hand flopped onto my arm, my other arm, but it landed just like that, like it was grabbing my arm. And it scared the shit out of me because I couldn't feel it in my right hand at all. All I felt was somebody grabbed my left arm. It was my own damn hand. It like completely freaked me out. It reminds me of a story. My dad did that once where his hand flopped over on his face and he screamed because he thought somebody had grabbed him in his face while he was sleeping. Let's see. Why does the tiger barbs chase their fin nippers? And so they're either aggressive or they're feeding. Yeah, I was actually thinking about the deer thing the other day about the way I chase them out of my yard, and I have customers that sick their dogs on them and whatnot. There are a lot of people out there that think like, oh, you have deer out grazing in your yard and whatnot. Like, I get it if you've never seen them anymore. It reminds me of when I lived in Florida. My mom and dad came down to visit me. They were so tickled by seeing armadillos on the side of the road. And I get it. You live in Maryland your whole life. You've never seen an armadillo before. You go down there and there's armadillos on the side of the road the way I have squirrels on the side of the road up here. Um, and they were just, they wanted to slow down and look at them, and it seemed kind of silly. So if you live somewhere, like if you've grown up in the city, or you move out to the country, or you drive out in the country, sure, you see some deer. They're majestic and beautiful and graceful and all that kind of stuff. But if you live around the deer, they're fucking nuisance. It's like having a damn groundhog in your garden. They're not cool. Actually, groundhogs are pretty cool. We have a couple groundhogs that live around here. So I spray my deer repellent, on our plants. And of course, we chase them out of the yard anytime we see them. And areas we know that they come into the yard and move through it, we try to block off with like bamboo fences that we make. Nothing not Gilligan's Island style fences, but just, pile a bunch of bamboo poles and shit and branches and stuff just to deter them from coming through that area. Deer do a lot of damage. They can cost you a lot of damn money if you spent money on your shrubberies. You have to get Eric the shrubber. No, his name wasn't Eric the Shrubber. What was his name? Roger the Shrubber. That's his name. Have to get Roger the Shrubber to come and give you some shrubberies. I couldn't do shit with my hand when it was asleep because I had nothing. It was completely paralyzed. All right. Do I like crows? I do like crows. Groundhogs can be assholes, but groundhogs have a lot of personality. I like groundhogs. Oh, yeah, you're pretty well screwed then, Mike. Oh, let me correct that for you, Zini. I can see where that would be annoying. You are a little cockeyed there, aren't you? Is that better? Or are we not quite there yet? Fish tropics. The little red live bears you see swimming around are some type of live bear. I believe they are platies, and I was given them by a viewer that was moving and needed to get rid of a bunch of fish, and he gave me like 80 live bears, a bunch of guppies. I spread them all around. I put them in a bunch of different tanks, but that tank got the brunt of them. And so there's little orange fish with the blue spots in the bellies are some type of platy. I can't remember the name of them. Whenever I do, and I'm making air quotes here, dance, it's the Caddyshack groundhog dance. At least that's what's in my mind whenever I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing that I think I'm doing. I think I look like that, but in my mind, I'm the Caddyshack groundhog when I'm dancing. My angelfish are not aggressive simply because I don't keep them mixed with other angelfish. And so there's no real aggression towards the other fish in the tank, so I don't worry about that. But if you do keep angelfish together, you can definitely get aggression between them. All right, let's move on to the 55. This tank has got a lot of, actually, let me lift you up a little bit so you can see over the bushes there. Keep having these damn red and blue lights flashing in my eyes. I almost ate that some of that rope tonight, Steve. I was going to. I had plans to this afternoon, but then I napped, and when I woke up, I completely forgot that I had planned on doing that, and I didn't remember until I was in the shower, and by then it was already after 7, and I decided that's way too late. I was going to eat it at like 6 o'clock, so it was kicking in right as we went live, but I forgot. Yeah, disco ball makes it look like the police are sitting outside. All right, let me get a swig of my tea, and then I'm going to spark up a joint. I had time to do one dab before we started, but I just cleaned my dab straw, and it still had alcohol in it. So when I did a dab, it had a really alcoholic taste to it. It wasn't pleasant. and that's rubbing alcohol, not cognac. So, yeah, it didn't taste very pleasant. All right, I knew I'd forget something. Let me go grab a lighter. So nobody wanted to try to guess my second Christmas song or my first Christmas song? Steve guessed my second Christmas song. Yeah, I still need to get that discus out of there and put it back in the discus tank and then get the bullied one out. I'm looking at him right now. He's being chased around and bullied, and he's half the size of the other ones. So that's the one I need to get out of there and put in this tank. And that big, full blue one needs to go back into the other tank because it was mated. All right, everybody. Cheers. See how long this one lasts before I have to spark it again. Neil. Well, I did 3 songs tonight. Steve already guessed my second song, which was Father Christmas by the Kinks. First song I listened to was a song by an all-girl band about regretting not being able to hook up with a dude last Christmas and then missing several opportunities throughout the year, only to finally, because of this year's Christmas magic, run into him in the grocery store. So I know you all know that song. Once we get past that, we'll move on to the third song because I think that one's going to be a little more challenging. I don't even know the name of the guy that does it. It's like a one-hit wonder, but it's a great Christmas song if you're somebody like me. The one song I'm talking about now is probably the most Christmassy Christmas song. Because if you actually listen to the Kinks' Christmas song, Father Christmas, it's all about commercialism and poor people and how, toys are for rich kids. My dad needs a fucking job, not a fucking new tie, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very much up my alley as far as Christmas songs. Nope, nobody's got it yet. This is more of like a pop rock and roll song. Let's see. Nope, not yet. No, I actually don't have any ghost shrimp at the moment, and ghost shrimp will eat algae and uneaten, bits of dead plant. They'll eat any kind of fish food. Most shrimp are pretty indeterminate feeders. They'll eat on anything that's food-wise. Nope. Come on, guys. I can't believe you can't get this one. It's Christmas Wrapping by the Waitresses. It's a classic. 8 Young, how are you doing? And the final song I was listening to, again, I don't even really know how to describe this song. I don't know the name of the guy that did it. It's a one-hit wonder kind of song. It's sort of pop, mostly strumming on an acoustic guitar, but it's a song all about being disillusioned by Christmas and, as a child, believing all the stories about peace on earth and harmony and happiness and all that stuff, only to awaken at the dawn and the day the world's basically the same. And, I basically, disillusioned by all this bullshit. So it's that kind of Christmas song. It's a lovely song if you don't listen to the words. If you listen to the words, it's one of those reality-based Christmas songs. Oh, when you said the Cranberries, I got you. I thought you were talking about the Cranberries because I said something about it being an all-female band. I thought you were listing the Cranberries as the name of the band that did some Christmas song. Right. They both forgot the Cranberries, and that's what the Christmas magic was. So you did get it, Neil. You just got it in a clever enough way that I missed it. Yeah, if you'd have said so you forgot the cranberries too, I would have gotten it. But when you said I like cranberries too, I just thought you were saying I like the band Cranberries because you thought I was referencing the Cranberries. This sounds like the kind of conversation you'd have on Too Many Mushrooms. All right, let's move on from this tank because there's not a lot going on in there other than what you've already seen. I don't know if you can see him or not, but you see that discus down at the bottom? I'll turn my light on. But right here is a discus, and he's rummaging around down there in the weeds trying to get the food off the bottom. The shark's in there somewhere. I see it from time to time, but it usually doesn't come out and make an appearance unless it's cruising around chasing people, which it does often enough. All right, let's move on. I don't know who it was that asked me about using wool as a filter material the other night, but if you're here, let me know because I do want to talk about that at some point. It's not a lot to talk about. I can go over it in a couple of minutes, but I do want to talk about it because, again, I learned something myself today when I looked into it. Mike, okay, it was your random thought. Yeah, I knew it was not a serious question in the sense that anyone was really considering using it, but it was interesting. And I like thinking about hypotheticals because that's how you learn about stuff. So I may as well talk about it since I've started. So if you missed the conversation the other night, I was asked again, just hypothetically, could you use wool as a filter material in your aquarium? And so just thinking out loud, a couple of people said that wool rots, and that didn't quite sound right to me. And so I was saying that wool doesn't really rot. It's hair, and hair doesn't rot, but it does break down. And so again, I dismissed it as a good option, but I wasn't 100% sure about the whole rotting and breaking down thing later that night. I was thinking about it, and there's been times where I've come across like old sweaters back in the woods or along the edge of a lake or something, and if you try to pick it up, it just comes apart in your hand. It's clearly rotting, and so I looked into it, like, okay, that doesn't make sense. And I know it's going to be kind of pedantic, so if you want to say that wool rots in the vernacular sense, that's fine. I don't think anybody's going to argue with you unless they're me. But I was correct in that wool does not technically rot in the traditional sense, but it does decompose. It is an organic material, and therefore it does break down. But because it's made of keratin and protected by a cuticle, it breaks down very, very slowly. What speeds it up, however, is moisture, our good old friend moisture, and oxygen. And the way it breaks down is through microbial, bacterial, and fungal activity, which, this is the important part, they break down the proteins that are in the keratin. I never realized that keratin was a protein-based material. And so what I can conclude from that is that if there are proteins in there being broken down, proteins are a nitrogenous compound. And so when they break down, they're going to produce ammonia as a waste product. So not only would the wool filters break down over time, of course, you'd have to go long periods of time without changing them, but they would break down, but they'd also be adding to your bioload. Now, I'm sure it would be a very, very insignificant amount given the rate that it breaks down and how much protein is really in there, et cetera. But technically, if proteins are being broken down, then ammonia is going to be a waste byproduct of whatever organisms are breaking it down. And so that was the little part that I learned about it. So I was right about all the other stuff. It is just sort of a pedantic distinction between rotting and decomposing, etc. But I did not know that hair was a protein-based material. So I do find that interesting. Was it my red-tailed loach that died recently? No. Neil, if you're saying I Am Santa Claus #3, I don't know if that's a song or not, but that is not what I was listening to. Yeah, I would think like a natural plant-based fiber, like again, the coconut husks, bamboo, stuff like that doesn't break down. And things like woodwork in our aquariums don't add to the nitrogen cycle. There's very, very little nitrogen in wood. It's cellulose based. And so even when the wood does decompose and slowly break down, as would be with bamboo or whatever, it's not adding to your nitrogen cycle. There's nothing in there breaking down that's going to produce ammonia. So I would say any kind of hemp fiber, burlap, etc. Possibly even cotton. Again, I don't know if I'd want to use cotton as a filter material, but none of these things are going to be containing any nitrogenous compounds like the way apparently hair does because it has proteins in it. As long as there's no proteins in it, you should be okay. Yes, the red-tailed loaches can definitely be aggressive little fish. Did not know that when I bought it. I just got a warning saying that snow might be possible in the next few hours. I was going to have 2 proteins for dinner tonight, but I did not. I had a protein shake, and half an hour later, instead of having another protein shake because I was still hungry, I had a meal replacement shake, and the meal replacement shakes definitely fill me up more than the protein shakes do. But the meal replacement shake is like 550 calories or something, whereas the protein shake is like 130. Yeah, you can let it snow up there in Canada. I'll be just fine if I never saw another drop of snow in my life or even a flake of it. The 2 storms we just had go past, we got lucky on both of them, but it was kind of weird. The first one, we were actually supposed to get up to 3 inches because we were on the edge of it, but it was kind of passing us to the north. We were sort of on the rain snow line, but we were supposed to get at least a few inches of snow before it changed over to rain. And we got nothing. We got a little bit of sleet in the morning, and then that changed over to rain. So it made the roads messy in the morning, but ultimately amounted to nothing. But then the next storm that went through 2 days ago, that was the other way around. It came up from the south and was going under us, basically. I would say under. You get the idea. Going south of us, but we weren't supposed to get anything. It was supposed to just miss us completely. And we actually did get some snow out of that. It wasn't a lot. I think by the grand total was maybe a 1/4 inch by the time it was all said and done. But we did get a little bit of snow the other day from that. I do not like snow. That's how I knew I was an adult. The first time I realized I didn't like it when it was snowing, and then when they called for snow, I groaned. I was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely a grown up now." So, and I know there's plenty of adults that do like snow, but I know for me, the snow went from being like a fun childlike joy, and it meant the day off school or whatever, to like, oh, I got to go work in this shit and drive a truck, and it's fucking freezing, messy nastiness out. I went through that transition while I was a tractor trailer driver. And if you've ever been out in 5-degree weather and howling winds, lying underneath of a tractor trailer at 3 a.m. with a sledgehammer banging on your wheels to try to unfreeze your brakes, you might think differently about winter weather and snow and all that. But I had to do that on many occasions. Two inches down in Annapolis. That's interesting. We usually don't get. Yeah, I know there's a shit ton of glare on that tank. There's not a lot of fish in there anymore. The main fish is the angelfish over here. I got some loaches on the bottom, and then I've got that one Colombian tetra in there. So we can just move on because that tank's hard to see into, first of all, and then there's not a lot to see when you do look in it. This tank, likewise, we'll throw some food in it real quick. I'm not even going to bother to turn the light on now. Oh, and I was thinking about that story I was supposed to tell you the other day, Zini. So if you want to still hear my mafia story, I can tell you that. And I already know what your answer to that one's going to be. All right, we're just sticking with the crisps on this one. The only thing in this tank is a couple of discus and a few minnows. Those little guys you can see swimming around the top are some native gambusia. They got caught at the same time I caught the minnows. I actually thought for a brief time today that I might come in here and try to catch those last two minnows. I think if I get the minnows out of the tank, the angelfish will chill out a lot more, and I can just throw those minnows in the pond with the school that I have in there. I've got about a dozen minnows in the pond already. Well, once you're rolling, Mike, you can argue that you don't need the brakes anymore. But if you want to get the tractor to fucking move, or you want the trailer, if you don't want to just drag the trailer down the road, you got to unlock them brakes. Well, you know me, I'm always recommending fiber. It's some good stuff. Keep the pipes clean. All right. Again, I think we can move on. There's not a lot to even see in this tank. So I got to thinking about it last night while I was doing some sitting. And I do have two dead fish from this tank. I bought 7 Rasboras. They were, what are they? Brilliant Rasboras. And I got 7 black neons. Now I don't remember which one was which, but one costs $2.99 and one costs $3.49. So basically $3 and $3.50. So I had 2 of them die, and I saved their bodies. I put them in the freezer, and I got the receipt. And I was thinking, like, I really need to check the date on that receipt to make sure I can still get them, taken back before the 14 days expires. But as I thought about it last night, I only have those 2 dead fish, and I would literally be running over there for no other reason than that. It's not like I'm going to be in the area or whatever. Now, my truck gets 15 miles to the gallon on average, and it's about 15 miles away. So I'm looking at spending 2 gallons of gas, which is going to be roughly, what, $6, to go get at the most $7 back. Yeah, it's in an hour of my time. So I don't think I'm honestly even going to. Anyway, how are you doing? I don't think I'm going to worry too much about those. If I had 5 of them in there or something, that might be a different story. Or if I was going over there for some other reason, I do kind of need propane. If I have some time on the receipt, maybe I'll go get some propane tomorrow. That's right down the street from the PetSmart. Or the Pet. Well, honestly, it's right down the street from both of them. But I got to go to the Petco, not the PetSmart. Pond Puppies, how are you? Why don't I call them? Call who? Hey, TK. I have no idea heavyweight. I've never fed my bettas betta specific food. They get the same stuff everybody else gets. Actually, my bettas seem to prefer the vibrobites because they look more like the little bloodworms, which is probably more of a natural prey. Um, this one doesn't seem to mind the flakes. It'll definitely still go after the flakes, but it really seems to prefer the vibrobites, and so I just stick with those. But I've seen it eat granules or flakes, the crisps, what have you. But I've never gotten betta specific food. Well, with Petco, I would have to take the dead fish back, and I also have to take a sample of the aquarium water, which I always thought was kind of dumb. If you know anything at all about fish keeping, then all you got to do is get some good water and take it with you to the store. Dechlorinate some tap water or something and take it to the store and say, "Here, this is my tank water." And they check it because they're checking for nitrate mostly. Obviously, if they find ammonia in it, they're going to say, well, this is your fault. You killed the fish because there's ammonia in the water. Nitrite likewise. But I've seen them do that to people with nitrate. If you take a fish back and you take a bag of your water and they test it and it's got more than 40 parts per million nitrate, they won't give you a refund. They'll say you killed the fish because your nitrates are too high. So PetSmart is, you don't have to take water back with you, even though they say you're supposed to. I've never done it before and they've never asked. Petco, they won't give you a refund unless you bring a bag of your water for them to test, and then it has to pass their test. So again, I'm not that worried about the two fish I have. Again, they're either $6 or $7 total is what I would be getting back, and I'd be spending almost that in gas just to drive over there. Well, it's PetSmart, but it's all one word, Steve. Oh, I see what you're. I think that's the sort of play on words that they, use in their name like that, is it can mean two different things. That's always been my assumption. It is a pet mart, but it also is PetSmart. The kind of fish that died, I have no idea whether they were male or female. They were black neons. The fish we're looking at now is a male betta fish. And then the smaller fish that you can see off to the right here are they're the black neons. And then the longer, thinner ones that are a little more colorful are the brilliant Rasporas. At a glance, they're kind of similar. They're both sort of thin and they have a stripe down their side. But the black neons are very clearly shorter and stumpier. They have the black markings on them with the line, and then the Rasporas have like a whitish stripe down their side. You can see some there. And they got some more like reddish color in them. Very different looking when you look at them up close. But the red near the tail is the dead giveaway for the Rasporas. All right, let's move on to the final tank, and then we got a little bit of work to do. Get that air pump installed, and then we'll sit down and have a chat. I lifted you up to the chatting height rather than the feeding height. All right, we're gonna stick. Actually, let's stick with the crisps in here tonight. My Lotus is still not opened. Thought it would have been open and closed by now, but it's still working on it. So this food tends to be very floaty, but as the live bears and the rainbow fish strike at it and whatnot, it knocks some of the surface tension and some of it starts to sink, and it'll spread through the whole tank that way. There you go, Eugene. It's a triple whammy. I was thinking about something tonight that I was going to talk about that I thought was stupid. Now I can't remember what it was. It was like some kind of instance, had nothing to do with fish keeping or anything, but it was some kind of instance of like circular logic that just made me laugh that somebody was trying to make that as an argument about something. And I don't remember for the life of me what it was now. Oh well. I have a million things like that come and go. I almost wrote a couple things down today so I'd remember to talk about them as topics tonight, but I didn't, and so I didn't. I did remember to talk about the using wool as a filter material because I looked into that and I did find that interesting. That's the kind of stuff I find interesting. I found out that hair has protein in it. Yay! I'm smarter now. Um, I noticed both of the chocolate zebra plecos were in this cave today. Normally, the visiting one comes down this end because they're one that lives in a cave down here. But while they were both out, they were both in front of this cave. So I definitely find that interesting. Damn it, Janice. You made it. Oh, look. There's one here, and then there's the other one. So they've gone back to their respective homes. Maybe they were just having a quickie hookup. That's interesting. It looks like I can see more on my monitor than I can see on my tablet. Oh, I don't want to do that. Stop it. What the hell did I do? All right, you guys are back. Let me get my comment set back up. Janice, are you still awake, Steve? Do you want to see the mushrooms real quick before you go to bed? Speaking of mushrooms. So do I, Zini, believe me. I was thinking about that today. We still got about, I don't know, not too long. All right, let me go get that mushroom bag. I'm going to show it to you guys before Steve falls asleep. So I've kind of come to determine now. Keep in mind, this is my second bag I've inoculated. I haven't even fruited my second bag yet. But based on what I know about growing stuff and plants and things like that, I think I can say with a fair amount of confidence that there's probably no real way to speed up the initial period where you're waiting for the mycelium to grow in. I've done it two different ways now, and both of them are coming out right spot on schedule to be about 1 month exactly for the mycelium to be ready to start fruiting. And so we've got about a week left, and we should be getting pretty close to full coverage with the mycelium at this point. And if you look at it, you see how much white we've got going through everything now. Look at it all. Even the bottom of the bag has white all over everything. So that's all the mycelium. All we got to do is wait for that to be completely just a block of white, and it'll be ready to start fruiting. And that's getting pretty close to being just a block of white. And at the rate it's growing, I'm going to give it another week at the most, which will put it right exactly at a month from the date that I inoculated it. So doing it the patient, inoculate it and leave it alone for a few weeks, mix it up once, leave it alone for a few weeks. That took me a month to get it ready. And doing it, multiple breakings and mixings and, trying to speed it along and mix it up faster, it's going to take a month to be ready. So either way you do it, it doesn't really seem to matter. But I am excited about that because I miss having my mushrooms for my live streams. It always made the live streams a lot more fun, at least for me and Zini. Yeah, she did apologize when she saw me, run out the back door. Well, I didn't run. You can tell the difference between a scream that's a genuine scream of terror. Look, they're hanging out together again. See them? So I didn't think it was anything. I didn't legitimately think she was being accosted or something, but she fucking screeched. I mean, it was an ear shattering scream. She wasn't just going like "Psst, psst, get out of here." She probably woke up the neighbors. She screamed so loud, and she did it in like while she was in the kitchen. She just opened the door and screamed out of it. So I was right down the other end of the hallway, so I was basically at the end of an amplification tunnel. It was not an enjoyable way to wake up. All right, good night, Michael. You have a good Christmas if I don't see you again. All right, let me take a couple puffs off this joint here after I relight it, and then we will go put that air pump in the shrimp tank and see how long it takes it to clear up. I'm going to say probably a couple of weeks. It's not a filtration problem in the mechanical sense, it's a biological filtration problem. And so simply installing the sponge filter isn't magically going to make anything go away. It's going to take time for that sponge filter to get cycled in and start actually, doing what it needs to do. So it'll still take a little bit of time after we install it, but I'm 100% confident that it's going to clear it up. All right. Did I have any other good stories to talk about? Oh, Steve sent me a notification yesterday about Weird Al. I knew he was on tour. It's his bigger and weirder tour. And I know he's touring with Puddles Pity Party, which just sounds like the most epic concert ever, opening with Puddles and then having, Weird Al. But what I did not know is it is coming to Meriwether Post Pavilion, which is one of the local venues I could go to. I guess where I live now, it's maybe a little more than an hour drive to get down there. But I saw Roger Waters there. I saw the Stray Cats there. I've seen a bunch of bands at Meriwether. It's like an indoor outdoor pavilion. If you spend money on the expensive seats, you can get in the pavilion, but it also has like the big amphitheater bowl shaped lawn you can sit on. It holds like, I don't know, what would you say, Steve? 10,000 people, something like that total. It's not a huge venue, but it's a nice venue. But I got to thinking about the Meriwether, and I don't know if you like. I don't know if the name Meriwether Post means anything to anybody, but at once upon a time, Marjorie Meriwether Post was the richest woman in America. I think she died in the mid 70s or early 70s. But she was extremely wealthy. She was the heir to the General Foods, or basically she was the owner of General Foods, like Post cereal. And one of the things that she did was she bought, she had a big, gaudy, tacky looking mansion made for herself down in Palm Beach, Florida, and she named it Mar-a-Lago. So we have Marjorie Meriwether Post to thank for Mar-a-Lago. So it's a weird world we live in. 19,300, dude. I just guesstimated. Oh, I said 10,000, didn't I? Not 20,000. So holy shit, I missed it by half its capacity. Meriwether holds 20,000 people. Damn. Robert. That is a pretty big venue. I had no idea it was that big. Holy shit. What does Nissan Pavilion hold since you're looking it up? Because I thought Nissan was the big one. No, Ark, I thought about doing that today, but I got to think about what I want to do with them first. I don't want to just randomly slap them around places. I've had another just sitting around kind of day today. All right, I'll tell this story while Steve's still awake too. Before I was going to save this for when I sat down and had story time. But I told Zini I would tell this story because he wants to hear. It's not my story. It's a story I heard from somebody, but it's related to a story of mine. Hang on. Damn it, my joint went out again. So I don't know how much people know about the mafia or the mob, but back in the 1970s, the mafia was a lot more prominent, and what the kind of shit you see like in movies and stuff, how they leaned on businesses and they owned businesses and, all that kind of stuff. That was a lot more real back in the 70s. And the block down in Baltimore City was heavily heavily mob influenced, as was a lot of the politics and so on and so forth. So if you're familiar with John Gotti, he's known as the Teflon Don. He was the Don of the Gambino crime family, and he's one of the most famous mobsters like ever. Like there's Al Capone, and then there's John Gotti. There's even a fucking reality show about his family growing up Gotti or something. Anyway, I worked with John Gotti's nephew, and I cannot remember what his real name is to save my life, but he went by Lucky. Everybody just called him Lucky. But he was John Gotti's nephew, and he was in the mob. He grew up in the mob, and he was, a hitman, or just, he was a heavy. He did what was, asked of him, basically. If that was killing somebody, then that's what he did for him. And so I don't remember a ton of the stories he told me, but when we had downtime and we're just sitting around shooting the shit, he would tell stories about different stuff he did. I was like 22 at the time or something, so I was a wide-eyed, like listening with, giant goggle eyes, listening to these stories he was telling us. But the one that always stuck out to me was, again, this was the 1970s, so it was a different time. And back then, if a prominent politician had a gay son and that came out, that would ruin that politician's career, just simply having a gay son. And of course, the police didn't do anything about gay crime. If people were sexually assaulted or whatever, the police just ignored that kind of shit. And so at one point, there was a place in Patterson Park that was like a gay cruising area for late at night on Saturday night kind of thing. And a very prominent yet unnamed politician's son got sexually assaulted while in that area of the park. And so it would have been an absolutely huge scandal where he was, the fact that he was gay, the fact that he was, assaulted like that. And so this politician, in order to get some sort of justice, couldn't go to the police or anything. So he went to the mob. He had mob connections or whatever. And so Lucky and a guy that he worked with, an associate, were the ones that were assigned. Like, they knew who the guy was. Again, the police didn't do anything about this kind of crime. So this guy was well known in the area. He was a predator. And so Lucky and this other guy were basically assigned to make sure this guy's never seen in Baltimore again. And so they went to the park and they hung out, late at night for a couple of Saturdays. And about 3 weeks into it, they found him. They got him. And they stuffed him into the trunk of their car and drove him to the outskirts of Baltimore, which back then were outskirts, and they were desolate wastelands, and people dumped garbage and stuff like that in big open empty lots and whatever. And so they went to one of those areas that was all open and just people dumped a bunch of junk back there, took him out of the trunk, stripped him naked, and worked him over for a little while, just beat him up real good. And then they handcuffed him to an old washing machine somebody had thrown back there, and told him that they were going to go back into town and go to some diner and get some dinner, and they'd be back in an hour, and we're going to kill him when they got back. So they went to the diner, did their, had their dinner or whatever. And when they came back, him and the washing machine were gone. It was just gone. They weren't going to kill him. That was the whole point of it, is they were just trying to scare the shit out of him. But he was never seen in Baltimore again. He got the fuck out of Dodge and never came back. And so that's basically what they were tasks to do. But I always just thought that was a hilarious story. I could just imagine that naked guy scared to death, crying, fucking carrying a washing machine with the adrenaline of the fear of death, powering his body. Yeah, that's always a funny story. It's a horrible story, but it's also a funny story. All right, let's see. It's wow. I thought it would be a lot bigger than that, Steve. And it's called Jiffy Lube Live now. It's not Nissan Pavilion anymore. Yeah, I know Pier 6 is a fairly small venue. I've been there. Well, I mean, when I say know about the mafia, I mean like the names of different people in the mafia and that kind of thing. And of course, you live in the Northeast, Janice, and live out in the Midwest. It's a little different. All right. So there was your story time. But I actually managed to work my way through a good portion of this joint. All right, let's go get this done. Yeah, I could name a few mafia people, but not necessarily everybody can. Zini, for example, I'm sure if I had just thrown the name John Gotti out there without any explanation of who he was, Zini probably would have not had any idea who he was because he's not American. And John Gotti was like done and in prison for the rest of his life when Zini was fucking born, probably. When did John Gotti finally go to jail? They got him like the same way they got Al Capone. It was like a tax evasion kind of thing. All right. So we're going to start by taking the lid off, which is going to limit my lighting. Let's see if we can prop it up in a way that'll give me some light. That kind of almost works. Not really, but sort of. All right, that's good. Now, I believe this whole tray comes out. It does not. This little tray comes out, but I don't know if that'll help me or not. Oh, yeah, that'll help me. So we'll just sit this over here for the meantime until I knock that over. Let me see. The next thing we're going to need to do is cut ourselves some airline because I have to get it attached to the pump before I put the pump in the water. So let's do that. And I'm just using standard cheap airline I get from Walmart. This is another one of those things that if you're a fish keeper and you just have fish tanks and stuff, there's just stuff you should have around. You should have some airlines. You should have some extra air stones. You should have a few spare air pumps, depending on your tank situation. You don't need a few spare air pumps if you have two tanks. Certain meds, just having them handy and available. Various things of that sort. All right, let me cut the line because we're going to put a valve in it to slow the airflow down to where we want it. All right, so airline with the valve on it, and little baby adorable sponge filter. Let's get the pump out. Just a little Tetra Whisper designed for up to a 10-gallon tank, but I find these little up to 10-gallon tank jobs tend to move quite a lot of air, and I think it's going to be a ridiculous amount of air for this little tank, hence the flow valve. And I believe I have I've got two electric cord spots available. Look at me. All right, let's set that down. Let's plug it in, make sure it works. Yeah, it works. It does. All right, I'll set that here for a minute. That'll float and soak up some water. Just going to take the little short end, stick it on here. So get a little water on that to lube it up a little bit. The airline they sell at the Walmart is the narrower diameter, and it really is a tight fit getting it on some of these nipples here. And yes, I said nipples. All right, so that is on there. And now we need to get this hooked up. So we'll take this off, slide the air hose through it, hook it onto this, which likewise is going to be a challenge. There we go. Put the little hose back in. And have to squeeze it a few times to get some water in there so it sinks properly. And we're going to tuck it into the corner as much as possible. Yeah, that still wants to float. All right, that should do it. And now we'll hook this end up to here. All right, now we'll open the valve. I should probably put a little flow check valve on this too. No, that's perfect. So full crank is a bit much. Well, let me lift you back up. So that's wide open full crank. I think that's a little more than we need, but we can slow it down to something like that. And that'll barely be noticeable. Now, let me put this back in properly. Oh, I hope that didn't wake my wife up, although it's not like she wouldn't deserve it. All right, calm down, everybody. All right, so that's back in there. That's tucked out of the way. Perfect. All right. So that is barely noticeable if you're really looking in there. You can kind of see it. I don't know how well you can see it from this angle. So I think that right there is going to be my problem solved. And as far as like looking into the tank, you can tell it's not really doing a whole lot as far as making the surface disrupted or bubbly or anything. It's barely moving the surface. It's staying well underneath of that corner. And then, of course, all the leaves in there diffuse any water flow. So we're barely getting any disruption at all on the surface. That's perfect. Now, the only thing I'm going to need to look out for is if I start getting grunge and shit growing all up in here because of it splashing, but it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be sealed up well enough. So this is probably going to work out great. Another couple of weeks, that's going to be a clear as a bell and looking beautiful. Look at all them shrimps down there. Tank is freaking loaded with them. All right, everybody, we're going to come around and cop a squat. Let me get my fan back in place. All right. Let me go put my airline away. And we'll come back in here and get situated for some chatting time. Close enough. All right, let me get my stuff. Get my light turned on. All right, Dade. Perfect. Oh, thank you for the stop signs. It's been Jiffy Lube Live for 20 years. It's probably about how long ago it's been since I've been there. In fact, it might have even have been Jiffy Lube Live when I went there. I just don't remember. It's just Nissan Pavilion to me. Yeah, having some extra air pumps is always a good idea. Early 90s. Okay. Yeah, I knew he went to jail a long damn time ago. Cornish, how are you? Nothing's wrong with the filter. I just didn't have one in there. I've got the filter that comes with that little tank, and if you've ever seen one of those, it's a Aqueon Mini Bow is the name of it. It's 5 gallons, and if you notice, there was like that black shelf that I took that little insert out. That little insert is the filter area. There's a little pump built onto the bottom of it with a little hose that hangs down about 3 inches. That's where the intake is, so it's nowhere near the bottom of the tank. It's way up by the top. And then that's it. It just pumps a little bit of water into that tray. And the idea is you lay a filter pad in there, and then the water has to flow through the filter pad and then just flows back into the tank. But I don't really worry about physically filtering it. The Java moss and everything that grows in there acts as a physical filter, but I don't have enough biofiltration in that tank. It was fine before, but the snail population or something has gotten to the point where it just can't cope with the bioload in that tank. And the water went cloudy on me about, I don't know, months and months ago. And so I've been waiting, hoping that it'll sort itself out, and it just hasn't. So I've decided that putting a sponge filter in there to give it a lot of biofiltration, at least relative to the size of that tank. I know I only put a little tiny filter in there, but it's a 5-gallon tank with shrimp in it. So that should be enough additional both water circulation, because that's a problem. You saw how little water flow I got in there. It's practically a stagnant tank. So even if I do have the surface area for all the biological function, that tank doesn't have the water flow. And I always, go on and on about how my filters, I don't think about them so much as filters as I do water pumps. I think about them as moving the water around. That filter just doesn't move water around. So there's enough stuff in the tank that if I had good water flow, we probably wouldn't have cloudy water either. I could have probably put a small power head in there and accomplished the same thing. But ounce for ounce, if you're looking for biofiltration, you just cannot beat the air-powered sponge filter. And so since Art gave me those tiny little ones that are just, practically built for tanks like that, that's obviously the more sensible way of going about addressing it. So we'll see in a week or two, once that starts to get cycled in a little bit, we should start seeing that tank clear up really quickly. A discus over there darting and dashing around. I really do think it's the minnows in there that fucking piss them off. I need to get them out and put them in the pond. I think I made that decision today. I didn't actually do it, but I did decide I was going to do it. Yeah, well, you can't over in the sense that the shrimp are going to become overweight or anything like that. But whether they eat the food or not, it's if you put that food in the tank, you're putting that much protein or whatever, you're putting that much nitrogen into the tank. Now, I know when they eat it, their bodies do absorb some of it and that sort of thing. But most of the ammonia, even when they digest it, they still expel the ammonia from their body. So if you're putting a lot of food in there, just because your animals are eating all that food, remember, every bit of food you put in that tank is being dealt with by the bioload. It's not like leftover food gets dealt with. All food that goes into the tank gets dealt with because as it gets broken down and processed, it turns into ammonia. And that happens whether it's inside the fish's digestive tract or rotting on the bottom of your tank. It's still being broken down and the ammonia is being released out of it. So anything you put in your tank is going towards the bioload. It's not just the uneaten stuff. I've switched over to just using 30 milligram nicotine, and I go through like a tank or 2 tanks of this a day now. I just puff on it like the cocaine monkey. I just keep hitting the button. So let me get my brain back up to normal nicotine levels. All right, we still got a little while to hang out. If we got any other thing we want to talk about. I noticed another dumb thing that is a trend in Doctor Who's that I wanted to talk about tonight because I know how much you guys love when I talk about Doctor Who. I watch the numbers just plummet when I start talking about Doctor Who. They might be bloated, Robert, but they also might live for a long time. Have you ever seen the bloated molly I have in my pond? It is like if I poked it, I think it would just explode in the tank. It looks like a golf ball swimming around. It looks like a balloon molly that has bloat. It's the biggest, fattest, most bloated looking molly I've ever seen. And it's been swimming around in there like that for as long as I can remember. I always just assume it's going to die at some point, and I keep just seeing it when I turn the lights on in the morning. When I come down in the morning, the pond is like crystal clear. I can see all the fish just hanging out, swimming around. That's when I usually take a few minutes to look in the pond. I can see all the little minnows. And again, I've got cherry barbs in there. I got all kind of stuff going on in that pond that you don't really notice, especially on camera when the big, bright, large size koi and goldfish and everything are right there. You can see some movement here and there in other fish, but you don't really see how much I actually have in this pond. I have quite a lot of fish in there. But that big fat molly has been in there forever, and it's not fat. It's bloat. It's got to be. I've never seen a fish that looks like this that's just overweight. It's ridiculous. So they can live for a long time like that, apparently. Not all African cichlids are hardwater fish, but all African cichlids are hardwater fish. When people refer to African cichlids, they're typically talking about the really brightly colored Rift Lake cichlids. My spotted tilapia is an African cichlid, technically. It comes from West Africa, not in the Rift, Valley region where it comes from more neutral, softer waters and does fine in my aquariums. But typically, when someone talks about having an African cichlid tank, or they just generally sort of refer in the hobby to African cichlids, they're usually referring specifically to that group of African fish that comes from the Rift lakes, and they're all hardwater fish. Yes. Oh, that sounds good, Steve. I'll definitely take that next time we see each other. My other brain has reiterated for me my other repository of knowledge. Zini's like my overflow. My brain got too full at some point, and all the flow over stuff goes into his. That's why it's still a little bit of a jumbled mess. We haven't cleared up all the boxes yet. I don't know what to tell you on that one, Robert. Are you in Maryland? Because for one thing, every state has its own supplies and dispensaries, and everything's internal. It's all intrastate. There's no interstate weed stuff. So whatever state you live in is gonna, I know there's some big international corporations that have stores in all those kind of states, and there's probably some brands that are across the board. But first of all, I couldn't name two of them probably because I haven't been to the weed store in over a year now. Oh, damn it, we missed it too. Let's go have a look at my giant plant. I'm finally starting to see some brown hairs develop. It's just very, very few early brown hairs developing on some of the lower buds, but it does mean we're moving towards the finished product here. The light was already on. So this is the most massive bud I think I've ever grown. And it's only on a 3 foot tall plant. At its widest point up here, it is at least bigger than a soda can. I had to put 2 stakes in it to hold it up because it was falling over and hitting the side of the tent. It wasn't going to snap the stem because it was leaning up on the tent, but it was leaning against the side of the tent. Even these buds down here are giant size fucking buds, and they're the little tiny bottom branches. So I am starting to get a few little brown hairs, but it's been on the 10th will be 2 months. And so what's today, the 7th? So we're basically at that 2 month point, and I'm just now starting to get brown hairs. So I think this is going to be more like a 10 or 11 week plant rather than 8. 8 is just kind of a rule of thumb. There are some plants that'll flower in as little as 6 or 7. Most of them are around 8 to 9, and then you get into a few that go longer than that. There's some out there that come from more tropical regions where, remember, tropical regions get about 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of dark year round. So those plants don't have the same radical shift in photo periods the way plants in North America or South America do, where in the summertime they get lots of sun and then the days get shorter and shorter, which is what triggers the flowering. Tropical plants get 12 and 12 year round. And so they grow a little differently. And some of those strains can take as much as 14 or 15 weeks to fully go through a flowering cycle at 12 and 12, because that's all they ever normally would experience anyway. The rule of thumb, though, is if you don't know for sure, figure on about 8 weeks and then kind of go from there and see when it's done. But don't just chop it down at 8 weeks because that's the date on the calendar. And, you still have to make sure it's ready to be cut down. But it's usually about 8 weeks or so. Ark's probably there somewhere doing something or other. You could go online easy enough, Robert, and just look around and look at some different reviews. I'm sure you've got a variety of dispensaries. I don't know how populated of an area you live in. California is a big state. There's stretches for hundreds of miles where nobody lives. But if you live near any kind of city, I'm sure you've got multiple dispensaries you can go check out. Check some, reviews and see what they're like, or look at some different brands or whatever. But again, everything is going to be internal within your state. Now, I do know, again, there are some big companies because there's only like 6 companies that own everything in the world at this point anyway. But they may market their brand under different names in different states. Or again, I just don't know. I don't really know how all that stuff works. not a big fan of the weed industry. When I was a kid, I always imagined that weed being legal would be more like, you know, me growing it myself, or some local dude grows it and is allowed to, I never imagined it would be this giant $1 billion corporate industry with all this fucking mass produced commercial grade garbage weed. Like it's just not ever what I expected. It's weird. I did watch an interesting video the other night that kind of confirmed what I thought um, about the ratings on THC and all that. The first thing it was saying is don't go chasing the high numbers. It's not necessarily indicative of having a good buzz. You might get really high, but it might be really boring. You might smoke a weed that's got a lower THC rating, but has you contemplating the meaning of life while you're in the middle of washing dishes or something, because it's just a better overall, experience. So the high number without all the other terpenes and stuff associated with it, just having a lot of THC doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. And then as far as how it's rated, anything over 30%, and you got to question whether it's even accurate or not, because these companies exaggerate and they always take their most primo thing and have that tested. The commercial garbage, popcorn buds that you're buying off the bottom of the plant is not what they sent to the lab and had tested, et cetera, et cetera. So I found all that to be pretty interesting. But the thing I always wondered, like I've seen weed that was rated at 41%. And while it did get me really high and it was almost like smoking hash, you have to wonder at a certain point, it can't have like more THC than it does plant material. Like it has to have the plant material to produce the THC. Like once you're getting up to like, it's almost half the weight of the plant is THC. That almost doesn't seem possible. So I don't really trust those numbers a whole lot. But the main thing is that just because it's got a really high number doesn't mean it's going to be a really good weed. And then the other thing he talked about was, it was a thing about dispelling myths. He talked about the sativa indica thing. And I was like, yes, vindication. Somebody else finally is willing to say that that's bullshit when they say indica makes you sleepy and sativa makes you awake. It's nonsense. You got to look at any individual strain and see how that strain makes you feel. That's just the hard truth of it. Don't go chasing waterfalls, Zany. I'm sure if you get in that circumstance, Robert, if you get them pretty much anything from the store that's got a really fancy sounding name or whatever, they'll be tickled pink with whatever you get them. You're not going to be able to see it or smell it or anything when you go in there. Actually, I don't know. I've heard of people that can go to dispensaries where you actually get to look at the weed. Mine don't work that way. You can look at pictures of it and see what it says about it, but you can't open the containers. Everything's sealed. There's, you don't smell the weed until after you've left the store. If you're getting it for a gift for somebody, just get them some, whatever, purple kush or something, and I'm sure they'll be happy as hell. Oh, I just saw way too many. I thought you were talking about dispensaries. If you want to reduce the population, get a small cichlid and put it in there. Problem solved. Yeah, Zanny, stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to. Don't go chasing waterfalls. I still haven't heard that song. I know you sent it to me the other day, but I deliberately chose not to listen to it just so I can say I've never heard that song, and it can just be a funny thing to think about without me actually knowing it. But if you really want me to, I'll listen to it so I know what song you're talking about. But I still don't know the song. And I did have an interesting Doctor Who coincidence the other day. After my live stream on Friday, a friend of mine messaged me and asked me what channel I watched, where I'm getting all these classic Doctor Who episodes. He said he could do him some Tom Baker. Hasn't seen some old Tom Baker episodes in a long time. So I sent him the link to the channel. And then the next day he texted me back and told me what episode he had watched the night before. And it was the same episode I had watched. Now, I'll grant you, I did watch 3 of them, and there's only a limited number of Tom Baker episodes. So odds are, it was pretty good chance he was going to get one of the ones I watched. But we actually did watch the same episode on the same night. So I just thought that was, that's got to mean something. Let's see. That is the way I ultimately, years ago, got my guppy population under control, and eventually they all sort of died off. I used to have tanks that just bred guppies, and I would spread them around tanks. That's why I used to have guppies everywhere, and I don't anymore. What I started doing was I set up, I'll call it a pseudo sorority tank. I started using my gourami tank as a sorority tank. So in the tank where the guppies were breeding, as the fish would get bigger, I would take the ones that were clearly female, even if they had been impregnated. I didn't care at that point because they were going in the guppy tank and they could have all the babies they want. I mean, in the gourami tank, and they could have all the babies they wanted because of the angelfish and everything. I wasn't going to have an overpopulation issue in there. So I always kept separating the females into that tank. And then the males, once they got big enough that I could clearly identify them as males, I would separate them out and I could put them in other tanks. And so I would use only the males to put in other tanks, and all the females I could catch would go into the gourami tank. And eventually I got it down to where there was only males in that tank and all my other ones. And of course, all the ones in the gourami tank eventually died off. And now I think that guppy and a couple in my wife's tank upstairs are all the guppies I actually have anymore. But I used to have a huge over guppy population. But it takes time, you gotta, just patiently keep getting in there. And as all, fish in there have more babies, you'll see more babies, in there. You find the ones as they start to get older and weed them out. Oh, let's see. Your comment suddenly makes sense, Zini. Fish Bro, how are you doing this evening? Yeah, guppies. Guppies are one of the, I won't say underrated, but under talked about fin nippers out there. A lot of people talk about guppies as though they're like the ubiquitous, harmless community fish, and they're just these friendly little guppies, and but they're really not. Guppies can be little bastards. Sexual aggression from the males towards the female aside, that's just any live bear. They're very typical in that behavior. But they are, they can be little fin nippers. They'll nip on each other's fins, but they will also nip on other fish's fins. So usually when you think about fin nippers, people will talk about barbs or specific types of tetras or whatever, but you seldom hear people bring up guppies in that, classification of the sort of fish you need to look out for as being a bit on the nippy side. So yeah, guppies can definitely be little nippy little bastards. That's for sure. All right, we are going to do a dab, and we are still working on that delicious, amazing hash oil that I've got. This is homegrown and homemade for anybody that's new. And hopefully we'll get back to being able to enjoy the mushroom live streams, because those were a lot of fun. At least I know not everybody necessarily had fun on my mushroom live streams, but I always enjoyed them, and that's the important thing. And of course, Zini enjoyed them, and that's the other important thing. As long as me and me are happy. I would take some guppies if you wanted to send them. I'm not a big fan of mucking with sending fish through the mail. I've tried it once or twice, and it was not successful. I did it through a store one time, but it cost $80 to ship. It was a big cichlid and like 2.5 gallons of water I was shipping. But I took it to the fish store, and they filled the bag with oxygen, and we shipped it. It was pleasant time of year, so we didn't have to worry about hot or cold weather. This time of year, shipping fish, you're definitely going to have to put a heat pack in there with them to make sure they get here alive, because I think tomorrow high temperature is supposed to be 27. I think the highest temperature this week, Wednesday, is supposed to get all the way up to 43, which is going to feel like fucking springtime compared to what it's been the last week and a half. Yeah, I've actually been thinking about buying some guppies, honestly. I've been talking about sprucing up a few tanks. My larger fish, like my angelfish and my 29, that lives 10 years, whereas guppies live a few. Tetras live maybe 3 to 5, depending on the species, maybe 7 if you're lucky. So those tanks go through what I think of more of the scenery kind of fish, or like like I think of neons as like mobile sequins. They're just little sparkles that move around the tank, whereas the angelfish in the tank is the main sort of key fish. So in some of my tanks, I've got those key fish that are still living on, but all of the sort of decoratory fish, the schooling fish, the smaller fish, they've all sort of died off. And so I do need to spruce up a few tanks. I really want to put neons in with the diamond tetras, and then that blue discus in there. I think that would look amazing. But again, the neons are like $350, and I don't have money to spend on a dozen neons at $350 a piece. So if somebody has neons they want to send me, 20 or 30 of, I'll be happy to take those. All right. I broke out my good hash oil tonight for the live stream, and that was delicious. So I'm going to do another one of those. I didn't realize it till the other day when I made my last batch of hash oil. That was my last 2 cans of butane. So I ordered a couple more cases, but they're not going to be here till the 16th to the 19th. So I've got like a week or more to wait before I get any more butane. I do have enough to keep my torches torched, but I won't have enough to make another batch of hash oil. Holy crap, that was huge. Got some good disco ball light action going on there. That was massive. Whew. Damn. That was a good one. Yeah, well, shrimp are a little different than fish. But you can give it a try. I'll always take some guppies. $20 for all of those? Good grief. Red-eye tetras are right around that $3 a piece mark. Serpes, likewise. Denison barbs are, for little tiny Denison barbs, about that big. They're about $15 a piece. I saw them the other day when I was at the PetSmart, because I always wanted some of those. They're beautiful. I want to put some in this tank, actually. But they were like that long. They were like 3 inches long, little
teeny tiny wisps of things. And they were $14.95 or $13.95 a piece. I was just like, there's no way I'm spending that much money to get a school of those things. They're eating the babies. Won't anybody think of the babies? Yeah, I would feel like that was free fish giveaway day. You know, buy 5, get 3 dozen free. Again, just the Denison barbs, they're the expensive one. All the other fish you listed are right around that $3.50. The Pristellas might be like $4 or something. You know, they're not as common. But the Denison barbs are expensive. Like a nice fat Denison barb that's like 5 inches long, you're going to pay $20 a piece for those easily. If you can find them that big. Man, that last hit was a doozy. That was a good one. My lips are all sticky now. I have a little ring of stickiness on my lips. You guys can make what you want out of that. But it's like Reclaim. It's like the stuff that gets on the inside of the tube. It also gets on my teeth and gets on my lips. It's a weird feeling. And I actually have to get a paper towel dabbed with a little bit of alcohol to wipe it off because it doesn't come off easily. I'm giving you guys gold tonight. I wish Bob was here. It tastes delicious too. I love the taste of isopropyl alcohol. But at least my lips aren't sticky anymore. All right. Let me check my messages. It's just letting me know there's going to be weather tomorrow. All right. I think on that note, we can probably get on up into first positions and start winding it down here. I'm going to put my dab stuff away because I'm definitely done with that, I think. I got my other stuff, my vape oil. I've been puffing on that vape stuff, and I'm glad I didn't get any more by accident. I honestly wish I hadn't got the second batch. I got 3 bottles, and then I got 3 more before I realized I had subscribed. And so I've taken some of it and I put some of it in one of my pods that goes on my, normally I hit nicotine out of this, but all you got to do is take the pod off and boom, now I'm puffing on that THC liquid. And puffing on it out of this does almost nothing to me. It gets boring puffing on it. Are they going to burn the coil up or something? Whereas, this one's got that huge sub-ohm tank on it and I can do such massive hits that after several hits off of this, I get a little bit of a buzz going, but it's just so nothing to it. It's just so hardly noticeable. It's a nice flavor, and if you enjoy just if you just want to have something to vape on just to pass the time. So in my case, sometimes I'll do that just so I'm not hitting on the damn nicotine. But as far as like something to get me high, it just doesn't cut the mustard. It's really, really weak sauce. So I got 6 bottles of it that I haven't even opened yet, and I haven't even gone through all of the first bottle. So I don't know how long it's going to take me to finally go through all that. Maybe I can do a prize giveaway one night and give people that stuff. Yeah, donked my head again. God damn it! Every week I donk my head on this thing. Do a prize giveaway of the typical kind of prizes that people give away, stuff that they don't want. Oh, we don't need that. All right, Janice, I'll give you some forewarning here in a few minutes. We'll start turning some lights out. We'll get some disco ball action before the night's over. And I know you don't like the disco ball swirling look. So I don't want you to have a seizure. What are we trying to do there? Oh, that's what I'm trying to do. You guys were all crooked necked. There you go. Look how shiny my head is. I didn't even shave tonight. Yeah, I definitely don't think I'm going to move to India just for low fish prices. I think I'll stay where I am. All right, everybody. Any last thoughts? Any last stories you want to hear about? Oh, and the point I never did make on the how often do I lose fish? Not very. I've had a few gouramis die recently, but they're aging out. You know, obviously all pets die eventually, unless you have a tortoise or a parrot or something. Um, but as far as fish dying, if they don't die within the first couple of weeks of me bringing them home, like I just had two die out of the neons I just brought home. That's not unusual to have some neons die when you bring them home. Um, they generally live a pretty good long time. Most of my fish actually live longer than what it says on the package. My head is like a rainbow conduit. Aqua balls. Well, aqua balls, that is definitely going to be an inconvenience, but I'm glad the fucking house didn't explode. Craig, how are you? Yeah, I've seen some houses blow the fuck up over the years. Not personally, of course, but I've seen of houses blowing the fuck up from natural gas. So I'm glad they got it. I'm glad they got it taken care of. Yeah, that can. If you guys had gone to sleep or something, that might have been the end of that. That's nothing to fucking mess around with. Damn. What's the longest I went without a water change? Oh, I don't have the tank anymore, but I had a tank that I called my foot tank. It started out as brackish once upon a time, but it was like a paludarium tank. It had half water, but it had land for crabs and crayfish to crawl onto. So it was like mud, sand on one side and water on the other. And eventually I just took the mud and stuff out and it just became kind of a tank that sat there. And I probably went over a year and a half, maybe 2 years without doing a water change on that tank. Most of my tanks, however, don't go more than several months. I have a couple that go 6 or 8 months at a time. 29 down here, which you can't really see. It's this tank right here. Um, that goes, I don't know. I give that a water change every now and again, a couple times a year, maybe at the most. Most of these tanks, my pond, these all get water changes with month, 2 months, something like that. I don't have any specific schedule. I honestly don't really even have any specific criteria for when I do a water change. It's just if I feel like doing one, if the glass is really dirty and I got to get in there and wipe it all down and clean it up a little, do some maintenance, I'll just go ahead and do a water change while I'm in there. If the tannins are building up too much in any given tank and the water's getting a little darker than I like it, I'll do a water change. But I don't, I don't do it at a certain nitrate level or a certain time interval or anything like that. I just do them when I feel like they need them. Sometimes I'll notice the crud's building up in the corners and I'll get in there and vac some stuff out. And, I'll do a water change then. All right, Zini, thanks for joining us. Oh, let's see. What cichlid could go in a 20? You could probably put like a German blue ram in a 20, maybe a keyhole cichlid, something tiny like that. There's a few of them out there that could go in a pretty small tank. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes for you. I used to do a lot of frequent water changes when I was newer in the hobby. Um, well, yeah, it's definitely not always necessary. Remember, when they're giving instructions on how to keep fish, if I were to just say to the public audience here on my YouTube channel how you should do water changes, I can't. I don't know what kind of fish you have. I don't know how much you feed it. I don't know what kind of filtration you have. I don't know anything about your water chemistry. And so the instructions they give have to be so basic and generic that it works in basically all situations. And so doing something like a 10% weekly and 25% monthly, even if you've got weird water, those aren't huge shifts that are really going to move stuff around too much. It's just a good, safe practice, like, because we don't know. Once, like, that's just so that you can get started keeping fish. Once you're keeping fish and you begin to learn about the hobby and understand what's going on with the nitrogen cycle and, what, excessive food does versus filtration and all that kind of stuff, you can start adjusting your water change schedule more appropriately to what your tanks need. And most tanks, if they're well maintained and set up properly, don't need weekly water changes unless you're doing small weekly. My water is such that I can do really big water changes without really messing with the water chemistry. So I don't do them often, but when I do them, I do 80% water changes or 75% water changes. I just do massive shifts of clean water, and we sort of start the clock over. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that don't know anything about their water chemistry or don't ever test the water and stuff like that. And I honestly don't anymore, but it's only because I've done it so much. After you've been driving for enough years, you don't need to stare at the speedometer to know how fast you're going. You just get a pretty good feel for what you're doing. I don't really need to do all that testing. But early on, I didn't know what was going on in my tanks, and I wanted to understand. And so I did a lot of testing and experimenting. And I watched. I did daily testing to watch to see how fast nitrates climbed and how feeding different tanks affected different water parameters. And I did all that. And I did that for years until I have ultimately accumulated enough knowledge that I don't really, I know way more than I need to keep the kind of fish I keep at this point. Like, I'm not at a challenging point in the fish keeping hobby anymore. I've learned enough to just kind of do these tanks without really putting a whole lot of thought into them. So I don't know. Will I ever get to a point where I do want to move forward and try a new tank, like try a blackwater tank or something? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Now, I will test if there's an issue. For example, if I find out that I have a filter that the intake got clogged and it hasn't really been flowing for an indeterminate amount of time. I don't know how long it's been since the water's been cycling through it. When I clean the filter off and get it flowing again, I'll give it a few minutes and then maybe I'll do an ammonia test just to be sure, stuff wasn't in the filter long enough that bacteria was, as long as there's no ammonia, I don't care about the cloudiness. That'll clear up in a day or so. I find a really huge dead fish in a tank, I might do a quick ammonia test. If I see the fish behaving abnormally, I might test for something. But I have those issues so infrequently at this point. I don't find fish behaving abnormally. I don't have issues with the tanks like that. So not to say that I won't. I haven't in a long time. My issues are usually man-made. And I've learned what all of my mistakes are. That's why I've sort of built my tanks to be Dan proof. I can fuck up pretty badly and the tank will keep functioning despite me. Let's see. How do I go about small fish like tetra barbs nipping each other? Yeah, in those kind of cases, if you've got a group of tetras and they're a little nippy with each other, that's you know you don't really have to worry about that. That's just natural behavior. If they're nipping your angelfish or they're nipping your gouramis fins or something, that's a different story. You might need to separate them or something. But any kind of little schooling fish like that, you're always going to see a little bit of inter school squabbling or whatever. That's perfectly normal. I wouldn't worry about that at all. Air bubbles at the top of your tank. Do you mean that have occurred there naturally, or do you have an air stone and the bubbles simply are making their way to the edges but not really popping? They're just kind of collecting on the edges. Either way, it is probably going to be an excess of proteins in the water. Proteins is what gives you like a frothiness to the water. If bubbles don't burst quickly, if they linger for a little while before they pop, that's proteins holding that film intact. And so if you've got bubbles developing on the top edge, it might just be cyanobacteria or algal growth where you're getting some oxygen buildup or whatever, sort of like pearling happening. It could be a lot of things, but it could be something that needs to be addressed with better circulation, or maybe if you don't have an air stone in the tank, put one in, that sort of thing. The air stone will break up the proteins on the surface and you won't have to worry about it. You can always do a surface skim. A good way to tell if you got too much proteins, especially on the surface, is you'll see the biofilm growing. I got a little biofilm going on in this tank here. It doesn't get any real surface agitation from the low filtration because it's a betta tank. But if you look at the surface of the water, you can see it's got a sheen and a film. You can almost see that blue, oily sort of color. That's biofilm. That's all proteins and biological growth that's just growing on the surface of the water. You start getting too much of that, and I can see bubbles starting to develop and not really pop because they're getting caught within the skim of that protein. So again, it's hard to say exactly what you got going on, but those are some thoughts about it. I've never heard it called the aquarium lookout tower, but I know what you're talking about, where you put like a column in the center and then you suck the air out of it to fill it with water so the fish can swim up into the air. And I've actually got something that I have thought about using. This actually was a fish tank I got when I first got into the hobby. It's got a little lid and an air stone in the middle. But that, if that was upside down in the middle of my pond, right to here, but this was filled with water, the fish would be able to swim up into it and you'd be able to see them. But I just think that would look so awkward and weird in the middle of my pond, having something like that sticking up out of it. Now, I'll grant you it would be cool. Maybe we'll do it just to see what it looks like. I can always just take it down later if I don't like it in there. I'll have to find some like cinder blocks or something because you got to prop it on something so it sits at the surface level. But I'd have to clean that up and make it a little clearer. But it should clean up pretty nicely, kind of like me. And I've even seen them where it's not a tower like that, but it's actually like a tunnel that goes up and over and then back down, and the fish can actually swim. It's like a bridge. And I have seen a guy Used to be a viewer of the channel until I started smoking weed and doing mushrooms all the time. He doesn't watch anymore. But he had a bridge. He had two aquariums side by side, and he had a water bridge so that his goldfish could swim up and cross, and they could go back and forth between the tanks. So that was pretty cool. All right, I don't know if Google's going to come up if I do a search, but if it does, I'll do the search. Oh, it is Google. Look at that. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And it is a stupid fucking Yahoo search, god damn it. It says Google, but when I do the search, it goes to Yahoo. Fucking computer. I hate computers. It'll be interesting. Maybe we'll do that next Friday for something to do on the live stream. And again, if I don't like it, I can always just take it down a week later. It's not like some permanent construction thing I'd be putting in there. So that'll be interesting. All right, everybody, I'm going to start turning some lights out. Get a few minutes of disco ball. You can get your last thoughts in. And then we'll call it a night. All right, everybody, this is your last chance. That's my disco lights. That's my disco ball. And the room is supposed to look trippy. I haven't had them in a while, but I grow my own mushrooms. And so usually when I'm doing these live streams, I'm on not a big dose, but I'm usually on mushrooms when I do these live streams. And they're a lot more fun because I have a lot more fun when I'm on mushrooms. Hence the trippy theme. So if you want to check that out, keep watching, subscribe to the channel, that sort of thing. It's going to be a few more weeks before I do have any more mushrooms, but they will be back, I promise. We actually looked at my mycelium bag earlier tonight, and it's coming along nicely. It's got about a week to go, and then I'm going to start fruiting it. And then so after about a week of that, I'll have some mushrooms again. So I am looking forward to it. All right. All right, Eugene, I will see you on next Friday. I first read that. I thought you said it was called January. I was like, no, we still got a long way to go to get to January yet. So, all right, everybody, on that note, I'm going to call it a night and say thanks for watching. I hope you guys had a good time tonight because I know I did. So make sure you tune back in next Friday. If you want to be a member, you'll get a Wednesday members only live stream. So on Wednesday night, I'll see you guys then. Otherwise, everybody else, I'll see you next Friday. So long, and thanks for all the fish.